Graham Motion, trainer of sharing. We're going to start with you first, just to get a sort of update on the filly that you're bringing over to Royal Ascot for the Coronation Stakes, Graham. How is sharing? How has she come out of her one run this year? Just give us a little update to start.
Yeah, I just actually spoke with Erin and said, she's doing really well. I mean, I'm not just saying that because we're getting ready to ship her to England to run in a Grade 1, but I really feel like she's doing well. She's almost filled out since she ran. She took her race really well. The weather here has been beautiful, which I think has helped her. And I just feel like she's training really well. We actually shod her today, sort of 2 weeks out from the race, which is important. So no, everything's going pretty smoothly so far.
And if we just rewind with you first to that Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies Turf win. There you are. You're back in vision. I was just going to say, it's all right. If we just rewind to the Breeders' Cup Fillies Juvenile Turf, talk me through that day and the build up to that, because obviously she had a good record, but she was a little bit of an outsider on the day, and then she won so well, and she had a pretty deep field behind her. Is that something you expected her to do it too?
We plotted getting her to the Breeders' Cup from the day after she won her maiden race at Saratoga. So again, everything just kind of fell into place. And even though I'm usually extremely, not necessarily not confident, but I know how hard these races are to win, I felt quietly very, very confident that day because she was doing really well.
Brilliant. And Aaron, we'll just bring you in at this point. Your Eclipse Thoroughbreds own her in conjunction with some other people as well. But just in terms of that Breeders' Cup win, or kind of going to the Breeders' Cup, how big a day was that for you? What was the build-up like? And what was the day like?
Over here in the States, aside from the classics, the Breeders' Cup is the pinnacle. It's the championship of our season. And to have runners at the meet is a huge honor. But to bring live runners to those races is an incredible feeling. And this filly, as Graham said, she sort of gave us that feeling for quite a ways out from the Breeders' Cup. And it was a very methodical plan that Graham and his team executed to absolute perfection. I don't know that too many Breeders' Cup winners have gone through Laurel as their primary prep for winning a Breeders' Cup race, but it was a very savvy move on Graham's part to pick the Salima as the launching pad, and the filly just did so well. Like Graham said, we were so quietly confident in her. We knew it was a really tough race. But she gave us so much confidence that I think we went in thinking we had a real shot to win. Manny Franco rode an ideal race. I mean, literally from the word go, he made every move perfect. And the filly was there for him, and she delivered an incredible victory for Eclipse Thoroughbred partners and our partners in our partnership, and Gainesway Farm of Anthony Beck, who has been a supporter of the Breeders' Cup for so long, and is such an important figure in the industry. And I don't think he had a Breeders' Cup win in over 20 years for the Gainesway brand. So it was just so special to do it with our partners, with Gainesway, and the Motion team and family. Just brought it all together. It was truly epic.
Yeah, it just sounds like such an incredible day, and what a lovely story to sort of, when the fillies obviously just flourishing at 2 and then being able to go there with a live hope and it all come off. But Graham, for you, I was reading a few articles on sharing sort of post the Breeders' Cup, and quite soon after the Breeders' Cup, the Coronation Stakes and Royal Ascot seemed to be sort of signposted as one of her main aims. Why was that at the forefront of your mind in terms of a plan for her in her 3-year-old campaign?
Look, I think part of it was because knowing the filly, she just got this great disposition. She just takes things really well. She's never been a bleeder. And I just felt she was a filly that we could do this with. If she had the quality, I thought she could handle it, from a mental point of view, I thought she could handle it. So it's definitely been on my radar. I mean, look, Royal Ascot's been on my radar now for the last 6 or 7 years. trying to keep up with Wesley with what he's been able to do, but I haven't been able to do quite as well. But look, it's a bucket list item for me to go to Europe and win a race. That's not why we're doing this, but it's obviously something that's always on my radar, and I thought this was the kind of filly we could do it with.
And so then over the winter, obviously you have that mapped out as her main sort of aim for the summer, I guess, or midsummer. How did her training go over the winter? How much did she develop and flourish? And again, was it a case of kind of the whole way through thinking, yes, this is a very realistic aim now to get to Royal Ascot?
You know, if you'd asked me a month ago that if we were going to do this, I would have said no way. I mean, who knew there was a pandemic around the corner, and with everything that's gone on since then. We started up with the filly. We pointed her for a race in Tampa earlier on in the year, which kind of didn't fall into place. It was a very tight schedule to get her to that race, the Tampa Oaks. And after her first week, I breezed her on quite firm ground down at Palmettos. She got a little foot sore. So Aaron and I talked about just backing off her, you know, not rushing her to get to her first start. The race at Churchill really came out of nowhere. You know, we didn't know that race was going to be there, but it fell right into the wheelhouse of the week that we had hoped to run her in order to get her to Ascot. I don't think we were still planning on coming to Ascot before we ran her because, you know, first of all, we didn't even know if it was practical. And secondly, we really didn't know how she was going to run, although I felt very good about running her. Once she ran and won so well, then it kind of got the thought process going again. And Anthony was very much on board with wanting to go. So that's kind of how we got to where we are.
Yeah, it's a brilliant story for this filly. Aaron, to bring you back in, you brought this filly, or Eclipse Thoroughbreds brought this filly as a yearling, as far as I can understand from sort of the records. Has she always been a lovely individual and a high-class individual, or has she surprised you? And now, is it a surprise to you that you're essentially on the road to Royal Ascot?
Well, when we bought her at Saratoga, she was a beautiful filly with a beautiful pedigree. You know, to take a step back to the Breeders' Cup, she's by a Breeders' Cup winner in Speightstown, out of a Breeders' Cup winner in Shared Account who Graham trained, who was by a Breeders' Cup Classic winner in Pleasantly Perfect. So she had incredible bloodlines, of course, to start her life. But when we bought her, the one thing that I think I would be saying that I'm surprised about is that she was so precocious, honestly. She didn't strike me as a strong early filly that was going to be quick or precocious. But from the moment she got to Stone Street Farm down in Ocala, when we broke her with Ian Brennan, Ian's a very conservative guy, very similar to Graham, and he picked her out right away. I mean, within a week, 10 days of her setting foot on the track, he knew this was potentially a very special filly, and he was spot on. She never skipped a beat. Graham, you know, is a very reserved trainer when it comes to providing expectations as young horses are developing, but I could tell he had an internal quiet confidence about this filly. She really never did anything wrong. And as she neared a debut, you know, we knew she was the type that you took over to Saratoga. But to be in this position now, especially considering everything that's happened with the pandemic and just all of the logistics that would have had to have taken place, in any good sort of history-making racing moment, there has to be a bit of serendipity. And, you know, for this race to pop up at Churchill at just the right time, and then literally Ascot to give us their schedule at just the right time, the logistics fell into place. I mean, you know, Graham and I are the type of guys that we don't look too far into the future. You have to plan, but we're not willing to commit until we feel 100% certain. I mean, I was involved with Animal Kingdom's development in his career when Graham trained him up to the Kentucky Derby. And just an example of that, even up until the week before the Derby, he had never breezed on dirt. And Graham wasn't willing to commit to running in the Derby until he breezed at Churchill the week before. So, you know, we're taking a similar approach with sharing in that everything needs to absolutely be picture perfect on each side of the equation, human side and horse side. And hopefully, touch wood, that's happening. And she's giving us a lot of confidence that if she has another good week, 10 days, and travels well, she's going to make us very proud in what's a very special moment to be associated with a filly like her at a prestigious meet and such a historic race like the Coronation.
Yeah, well, look, it'll be brilliant to have her over here. It's very exciting. And like you say, fingers crossed everything goes well for her in the next few days. Graham, from your point of view, obviously you brought Animal Kingdom over to the Queen Anne in 2013. How has this year been different, obviously because of the pandemic, in terms of the planning and bringing sharing over the entries? The International Racing Bureau over here has obviously, I'm sure, been extremely helpful, and Ascot themselves. Has it been a pretty extraordinary process at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I've kind of gone from one extreme to another. Animal Kingdom, when he came over to run in the Queen Anne, he was probably one of the favorites. We spent a lot of time in England. I was there from the time after he ran. We shipped him right from Dubai to England, I believe. So we've kind of gone to the opposite extreme here. We're going to come in very late for this race. I wanted to have her last workout here in America before she left. I thought that was really important. I'm not going to be able to travel, so I wanted to see her doing as much as I could before she left. So, I'd like to think we've learned from our experiences. I have tremendous respect for Mark Cassey and Wesley, who have done really well doing this. And I think I don't think people realize quite how hard it is to do this. Miss Temple City ran very well in the Coronation. So I like this race because I like that it's restricted to 3-year-old fillies. I like that it's not a straight mile. I think the straight mile is a harder race for us to adjust to. So I think from my past experiences, I hope I've learned. But we are taking a different angle. I've normally shipped into Lambourne. This time we're coming into Newmarket, just because I think it makes more sense this time. So hopefully I've learned, not necessarily from my mistakes, but from my experiences. Hopefully that'll help her next week.
And just to clarify then, if everything does go well with her gallop back at home before she sets off, when will she actually land over here in England then?
So she'll land on Tuesday, a week tomorrow. She'll overnight to Kentucky on Sunday after her work. Probably do her last workout on Saturday, train Sunday morning, get on a horse band to Kentucky Sunday night. She has to do a short couple of hours of quarantine at Keeneland before she goes to an Indianapolis airport on Monday night. And she'll get into Newmarket, into Stansted on Tuesday evening, which is pretty straightforward, actually, when you think about it. I mean, the fact that we can fly into Stansted, I think that's a big plus.
Yeah. And so then for you, Aaron, obviously in an ideal world, you're lucky enough to be involved in a filly like her, and she is hopefully coming over to run in the Coronation Stakes at Royal Ascot. And clearly it would be wonderful if it was a normal year and you could be over here. I presume you would have travelled had you been able to. But how will the experience be for you? How will you look at it? How will you view it? Where will you watch it, I suppose?
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, we're designed as a partnership company to participate in the biggest events, and not just participate, but compete and hopefully win them. And that's what our partners join Eclipse for, is to be part of those moments. So to not be able to be there in person and share the experience with our partners, Gainesway, and with Graham and his family, that's a little bit tough to swallow. But at the same time, this is really about the filly. She really does deserve the opportunity to do what we're asking her to do. Some of the best European fillies came to America for the Breeders' Cup, and we got the best of them on that occasion. And we feel it's appropriate that if she's doing well and showing all the right signs, that we try to do it over there as well, So first and foremost, it's about the filly and giving her that opportunity that she so deserves. And secondly, I think Graham and I and Anthony Beck are very much like-minded in the sense that we're facing difficult times in the world right now. Everybody's feeling the pain of the pandemic and numerous cultural and social issues that are going on in the world. And this is sort of a gesture of unity, of sportsmanship, and in trying to bring the world closer together. I know that we live in the bubble of the thoroughbred horse racing industry, but it is a small world, and we're just trying to do something that we think is right for the filly, and at the same time maybe has somewhat of a bigger picture effect of overall sportsmanship, and just trying to do something meaningful for everybody associated.
Yeah, it feels like this whole story is a real tonic for all involved at, like you touched upon, what is an incredibly tricky time. In terms of your experience of European racing, how much involvement have you had up until this point? Are you with any of our major race meetings? Is it very different over here?
Oh, it's very different, that's for sure. Eclipse did have one Royal Ascot runner. I think it was in 2013, a 2-year-old filly that we had purchased in England and kept her there to run in the Albany Stakes. And then we exported her to America, and she actually became a stakes winner here. But most of my personal involvement has been in a poaching position, trying to pluck talent out of Europe and bring it to the States, and hopefully translate that successfully. We do have a few horses in Europe. We have a filly with Marco Botti in England. We had a filly with Joseph O'Brien in Ireland. So we do have some presence there in Europe, and would like to methodically increase our numbers over there. We're big fans of English racing, and the ability to sort of develop horses there, with the idea of potentially bringing them to the States at some point. Or we're getting more open-minded about racing there on a full-time basis as well. So we're certainly open-minded, and very much humbled by the opportunity to have this filly at Royal Ascot.
Wow, exciting times. Well, we'd love to have Eclipse Thoroughbreds over here a little bit more sort of prominently. That would be really thrilling, because am I right in saying you spent some time with Team Valor, and obviously they're now over in Europe predominantly. That experience, and they've obviously been heavily involved in racing over in Europe. And I mean, do you think it's very important to be able to race horses on both sides of the sea, so to speak, in terms of if you're running a big partnership, a big syndicate?
I do. And yeah, I spent 4.5 years at Team Valor with Barry Irwin, and it was an invaluable learning experience for me. I grew up in Southern California, and I was so fortunate to watch a master like Bobby Frankel develop European imports for Prince Khalid Abdullah and Judmont Farms. And John Gosden was over here for a brief stint. So I was exposed to that at a very young age, and I was always fascinated by it. Barry was one of the first Americans really to understand how to effectively import proper prospects from Europe and be successful with them in the States. So I learned a lot from him during my time with him as well. And yeah, I do think it's extremely important. The world is so small now. Travel is getting easier. Owners and partners of ours are becoming more sophisticated. They have an appetite for a more global flavor, so to speak. And, as the industry on a global scale is somewhat contracting, the big events, the big days, the big races, that's really where people want to be. And to be able to do that on an international scale would be something that Eclipse is very intent on proving. We're very fortunate. We dipped our toe into the Australian market, and we had a classic winner there a couple of years ago with a filly called Pinot. So we're really trying to cut a wide swath across the globe, but in a very pragmatic way. So Europe is a natural extension for us, for sure.
God, how incredibly exciting. Yeah, hopefully sharing then will be the first of many we might see in the Eclipse colours over here in the UK. Just coming back to you, Graham, we've spoken about how tricky it can be to travel a horse. It's not the easiest thing in the world. I think it's something we probably do take for granted. But you mentioned at the very top of the interview how she immediately appealed to you as a filly who would take the travel well. Just to reiterate that, she's obviously got a great constitution, has she? She looks like she's taken her racing as a 2-year-old, and then obviously so far this year incredibly well.
She is very easy. Her mom was very easy. She was always just a very kind horse to be around, very uncomplicated. And I think Sharing has, taken up many of her traits. And like I said earlier, that's one of the main reasons that I ever even got to thinking about taking on this challenge, because you want to have the right kind of horse to do it with, there's no doubt.
And you mentioned about how Wesley Ward's obviously been one of the most prominent and significant American trainers who've come over here in recent years and had pretty good success. Have you, I don't know how he travels his horses. Does he bring them over much earlier? Are you doing things very differently this time around?
I think he does a little bit of both, Wesley. We've talked about possibly sharing the flight on Tuesday, but I'm not quite sure how his races fall into that. That's about as late as you could travel. I know he's already got a couple in Newmarket, so I think it really depends on the schedule, and I really haven't gotten into too much detail with him about that.
And then for you, again, obviously it's a completely different year and you won't be there, but still, what would a Royal Ascot winner mean to you personally?
Well, like I said, it's a bucket list item. I've been fortunate enough to win a Kentucky Derby, a Dubai World Cup. When I started racing, I grew up in Newmarket. I never could have predicted winning one of those races. It's just Breeders' Cup races. It's just not something that you expect to win as a trainer. You hope to win, you hope to participate, but I think to win those races, you always kind of have to pinch yourself. So, for me, who grew up in England, my parents, lived in England most of their lives, to come back to Royal Ascot with a legitimate chance, it's, you can't top that.
No, brilliant. When I was doing my research, actually, Graham, I noticed that when Sharing's dam, Shared Account, won at the Breeders' Cup when you obviously were training her, she was a 33-1 shot on the day and beat Midday, who was a even money favourite. And then obviously Sharing was a pretty big price on her Breeders' Cup win as well. So you've got a real thing going with the family and pulling a bit of a rabbit out of the hat, I suppose.
Yeah, in Shared Account, when we beat Midday, Henry Cecil was one of the reasons that I got into racing. I'd watch him saddling horses at Newmarket on a Saturday afternoon when, watching racing was a big deal on a Saturday. That's what we did, was we watched racing. And he was certainly one of my idols growing up. And I think for me, that was an extraordinary moment to beat Henry Cecil with one of the favorites that had come over from England. It was, it's a big deal.
Yeah, well, look, I've really enjoyed chatting to you both. This has been, insightful. The Sharing story is really something to get behind. Best of luck with her over here, and hopefully she makes it safe and sound. And I really look forward to seeing her here at Royal Ascot. And hopefully the good times, the good story will continue. It's exciting, very exciting, and it'll give us all something to cheer on in, like you both have touched upon, pretty turbulent times, I think.
Yeah, I think like Aaron said, this is really it's about the sport. It's very easy to go down the road and run in and cherry pick your grade 2s and grade 1s, but we want to take on the best, and we want to show what she's capable of, and I think it's what racing's really about.
Yeah, brilliant sporting attitude, and hopefully you will be rewarded, and I think it's safe to say we will all be behind you, so best of luck, guys.
Thank you
so much. You asked previously, when we bought her, did we have these types of aspirations? Well, I distinctly remember I was walking out of the pavilion that night at Saratoga when we bought Sharing, and I texted Graham and I said, I think I bought you a nice filly, and didn't say anything about it. And he had pulled up the results, the sales results, and he didn't make any mention of the fact that this was a filly out of Shared Account, a Breeders' Cup winner that he had trained. But in his typically sarcastic way, he said, well, that makes sense. She is a Maryland bred, because he trains out of Fair Hill in Maryland, as though that's what she was going to be. But to think that, like Graham said, one of the things that we've discussed a lot is the challenge of this endeavor. And we've both, along with Anthony, just really embraced it. We wouldn't be doing it if we didn't feel like we had the right filly. But she's giving us all the right signs that she is. And, you know, like Graham said, we could go down the road, we could pick out our grade 2s and grade 3s and do that. But I thought that was a neat little tie-in to his initial response to when I told him that I was going to send him the filly, which was, well, that makes sense. She's a Maryland bred. So we're all too enthused to be going to Royal Ascot with this Maryland bred, that's for sure.
The funny thing is, a little bit, not to go on, but how this has kind of fallen into place so far, touch wood. You know, the Breeders' Cup thing just really fell into place. You know, we just said this is what we were going to do if it worked out. And we did pick this kind of obscure race to get it to the Breeders' Cup, which, you know, no one had ever run in the Laurel. I can't remember what the race is called, but no one had ever run in that race to get to the Breeders' Cup, you know. So, and even by doing that, we risked maybe not getting in because it wasn't a race of much stature. So, you know, things fell into place. It makes it so much easier when you have people like Aaron and Anthony to do this with, because they just, they get it, you know. So it's exciting. It really is exciting.
I hope we'll see Eclipse Thoroughbreds a little bit more. It sounds like we will, which would be very exciting times for me.
Yeah, for sure. You know, there's no greater advertisement than a horse winning a race in England for us. So we like to let the horses do the talking, you know, and hopefully the Eclipse brand, the Eclipse name and image will sort of catch on over there in England. It'll be a huge honor. She carried our silks to a Breeders' Cup victory, and to have her carrying Gainesway's, you know, famous legendary silks at Ascot will be very, very meaningful for everybody. So, you know, it's just a great story. And regardless of the outcome, while we're certainly going over there with conviction that she belongs and that she's going to make us proud, she'll make us proud regardless. So just really looking forward to it and just want everything to go smooth. You know, we're really lucky to have Oisin Murphy signed on to ride her. You know, Graham's established a relationship with him, and by the looks of it, he started his season off remarkably well. So hopefully he stays hot. Graham is on fire here in the States. Eclipse is hitting on all cylinders. Gainesway is doing well. So hopefully that'll translate over into the UK as well.